It all started as a stupid joke. My buddy Jake and I had been drinking, swapping stories, trying to out-conspiracy each other. You know, the usual shit: Illuminati, flat earth, government assassins. That kind of stuff. But then he brought up something that was new to me: the cryptid conspiracy. I laughed in his face at first, because it sounded like the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. Monsters. Actual fucking monsters. Bigfoot, Mothman, the Jersey Devil. He and not just real, but controlled. The government wasn't hiding them because they didn't want people to panic. No, they were using them. They're fucking weapons, man, Jake said, leaning in like we were sharing state secrets. Genetically engineered or captured, I don't know, but they're being deployed all over the world. I rolled my eyes and downed the rest of my beer. And let me guess, Area 51 is where they keep their secret monster zoo. Jake didn't laugh. He just looked at me, dead serious, and said, "They killed my brother." That sobered me up real quick. Now, Jake's older brother, Mason, had gone missing a few years back. He was one of those extreme outdoor types, hiking, camping, the whole 9 yards. He disappeared while on some remote mountain trek in Washington, and no trace of him was ever found. It had been ruled an accident, just one of those tragic cases where the wilderness swallows someone up. But Jake never bought it. He always said something had gotten him. "What are you saying, Jake?" I asked, feeling the unease creep in. Jake sighed and lit a cigarette, taking a long drag before answering. "I'm saying the government used a cryptid to kill him. I've been looking into it for years, man. There are reports, missing people, sightings of creatures right before people disappear. This shit is happening, and they're covering it up. I should have shut him down right then. But I didn't. I guess the beer or the curiosity got the better of me, because I said, okay, prove it. Let's go find one of these things." Jake's eyes lit up, and I knew then I'd stepped into something way deeper than I expected. A week later, we were driving through the middle of goddamn nowhere, heading toward a small town in West Virginia. Jake had a lead, a string of disappearances, all in the same remote area, with reports of strange sightings. The locals were whispering about some kind of creature in the woods, but no one was saying it outright. They didn't have to. This was cryptid country, after all. We checked into a shitty motel outside of town, the kind of place that smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. Jake was buzzing with excitement, laying out maps and files, while I was still trying to convince myself this wasn't the dumbest idea I'd ever had. But there was a part of me that wanted to see it, whatever it was. The idea of cryptids being real, of something like Bigfoot stalking the forests, stirred something primal in me. Fear, maybe. Or just a need to know. That night, after a few more drinks, Jake pulled out a gun from his duffel bag. A fucking Glock. Jesus, Jake. What the hell do you need that for? He shrugged, sliding the gun into his waistband. These things aren't friendly. If we run into them, we might need to protect ourselves. I didn't like it, but I didn't argue. We headed out just after midnight, armed with flashlights, cameras, and Jake's paranoia. The forest was thick, the kind of dark that feels alive, swallowing every sound. Our only light came from the beams of our flashlights, cutting through the trees like knives. For hours, nothing happened. Just the usual night noises, crickets, the rustle of leaves, the occasional distant hoot of an owl. But the deeper we went, the more it felt like something was off. The air got heavier, almost oppressive, and the silence that followed was so thick it felt like I couldn't breathe. "You feel that?" Jake whispered. I nodded, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Yeah. It's too quiet." We kept walking, deeper into the woods, when we heard it, a low, guttural growl, not far off. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively reached for the knife I'd tucked into my belt. Jake motioned for me to follow, his face serious as we crept toward the sound. And then we saw it. At first, it was just a shadow between the trees, tall and hulking. But as we got closer, the thing came into focus. It was huge, at least 7 feet tall, covered in matted fur. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, reflecting the light from our flashlights. But its face was wrong. The features were human-like, but twisted, stretched into something unnatural. Its mouth was too wide, filled with jagged teeth that glistened with saliva. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at it, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. "Holy shit," Jake whispered, his voice shaking. The creature growled again, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate the air around us. Then it moved. Fast. Jake pulled his gun, firing off a shot. The bullet hit the thing in the shoulder, but it barely flinched. It roared, the sound deafening, and charged. We bolted. Branches whipped at my face as we tore through the trees, the creature crashing behind us, its footfalls heavy, relentless. I could hear it gaining on us, snarling, growling, like some kind of predator playing with its prey. My legs burned, my chest heaved, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. We broke into a small clearing, and that's when I saw them, more of them. At least 3, standing at the edge of the trees, watching us. They were different, but the same, a mix of human and beast, with eyes that gleamed in the dark. One of them stepped forward, its mouth curling into a grotesque grin. "We're fucked," I muttered, pulling the knife from my belt. Jake was out of breath, his hands shaking as he pointed the gun at them. They were waiting for us. Before I could say anything, the first creature lunged. I barely had time to react, slashing at it with the knife. The blade cut deep, but the thing didn't stop. It tackled me to the ground, its claws sinking into my shoulders, its breath hot and rancid against my face. I screamed, struggling to push it off, but it was too strong. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing through flesh like paper. Blood soaked my shirt, and I could feel the warmth of it spreading, but the pain was distant, drowned out by the adrenaline surging through me. Jake fired again, the gunshot echoing through the clearing. The creature on top of me yelped, recoiling as the bullet hit it square in the chest. I shoved it off, scrambling to my feet as more of them emerged from the trees. "This was a mistake," I gasped, clutching my bleeding chest. "We need to get the fuck out of here." Jake nodded, his face pale, and we ran. We made it back to the car, barely, both of us bleeding and out of breath. The creatures didn't follow us past the edge of the forest, but I could still feel their eyes on us as we sped away, the trees blurring into the night. By the time we got back to the motel, it was clear that this was no ordinary cryptid sighting. Jake's paranoia had been right all along. "They're not just monsters," he said, his voice shaking as he bandaged the gashes on my chest. "They were sent." "What the fuck are you talking about?" I groaned, wincing as I applied pressure to the wound. Jake's eyes were wild. "Those things, they're not natural. They're part of some kind of program, man. The government, the military, they're using them. Testing them." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was crazy, but after what I'd seen, I couldn't. Those things hadn't been mindless animals. They'd been waiting for us. And then there was the black SUV. It pulled into the motel parking lot the next morning. 2 men in black suits stepped out, their faces expressionless. They didn't say a word, just stood there, watching as Jake and I packed our things, their presence like a dark cloud hanging over us. As we left, one of the men nodded, as if to say, "We know. It's been a week now. Jake disappeared 2 days ago. Just gone. No note, no sign of where he went. But I know. They took him. The cryptids aren't just monsters. They're weapons. They're out there, right now, hunting, waiting for the next fool to stumble too close.